So greetings and welcome to my messy studio in my first attempt of a review of a vintage piece of gear that I just bought. Bought this on Fleabay. Um, I had one before years ago and really liked it, and sold it when I moved because I felt that I was already into the digital realm using the DAW on my MacBook, and I was like, well, what do I need this for? So I sold it. And then I regretted it not long after I sold it. And I'll tell you why I regretted it. It's because of the ease of use and the Porta Studio vibe. This is a Tascam Porta Studio 488 Mark II. 488 means that it can record 8 tracks. This is an 8-track recorder, multi-track recorder. It has an 8-channel mixer and an 8-channel recorder. And the funny thing is, it records onto cassette tape, if you remember that, right? Cassette, standard cassettes. This particular deck has to have a high bias tape, and you can still find new old stock of that on eBay if you want. And I still had some hanging around anyway. This is actually an old tape from when I had the deck from before. But you can buy this exact same tape still today. You have to have high bias tape for this deck. Transport section of this machine is pretty awesome. I'm gonna close this because it's kind of loud when it rewinds and fast forwards a little bit. But this thing works really well. So you've got a counter that you can reset right here. Counter reset. It shows you elapsed times in minutes and seconds, which is brilliant and which is really helpful for me, in my opinion. Of course, just like if you remember the old cassettes, a standard thing. Here's fast forward. Rewind, and fast forward. And the great thing about the transport is it's computer controlled, so you can just press all the buttons of whatever you want to press, and it's gonna eventually do. It'll stop at the last one, but I wouldn't recommend you really do that too much. But you can, just to show you how fine and how sensitive it is. It is kind of like butter. So if you're working on a project and you're starting to record something, and of course, where are you going to find it? I mean, this is not digital. You cannot just say, okay, I want to go back to section blah, 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 hit return, and then you're there. This isn't the way. You have to actually physically find what you're looking for on this tape. So a good way is when you're working on a project is this counter reset button. So you hit counter reset and it zeroes it out. And then there's this button right here is called return, RTZ, return to zero. If you press it, the tape transport automatically goes back to zero and stops. And that way you can find the beginning of your piece. You don't have to search and search and search. And of course, it also has these two location points, location 1, location 2, that you can set within a song. So if you just need to find a certain section of it, you can just hit this and hit that one, depending on. I've never really used that because that just something wasn't for me. But it's there if you want it. Then there's a repeat function, which is repeats between location 1 and location 2. You can set it that way too, so that if you want to try to rehearse something and you want a section over and over and over again, you can do that. Pitch control, which is a lot of fun. You can up and down the pitch control. I think it's a full octave from one end to the other. Don't quote me. I'm not 100% sure. So these are the track assigns so that you can record onto any of the 8 tracks available on the cassette. You can only record up to 4 tracks at one time. That's it. So you load them. There's 1 through 4. And if you say, well, wait, I want to go to track 5 at the same time. When you hit track 5, well, track 1 automatically disappears. And if you hit track 6, 2 automatically disappears, so on and so forth. It will only allow you to record on 4 tracks at one time. But that's okay. The limitation of that, for me, is fine because I've used this deck as a solo deck and maybe with one other person. And so if it's a solo or duo, that kind of stuff, it really doesn't matter because really you're going to record on 8 tracks at one time. What are you recording? You need something else then if that's what you're doing. Okay. So now the mixing board section. The mixing board is a very nice quality mixing board in my opinion. I like it. It sounds really good. It's got 8 inputs. two XLR inputs, and the great thing about these XLR inputs is that they're phantom powered. There's a switch on the back of the deck. They're phantom powered, so that way when you can plug in really good high quality condenser microphones, and then they need phantom power because that's what powers. Instead of having a battery inside of the microphone, they have this thing it's called phantom power because you can't see it, so they say it runs back up one of the lines in the mic cable and powers the microphone. And you can put some, if you've got, like I said, really nice microphones can go into there. There's only two of those, and I know some people have said, well, there's only two of these XLR connectors. But like, again, if you're working solo, if you're working with one other person, that's really not a big issue. You can plug in these two here, and then you still got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more inputs to plug microphones in if you need to still do that. So since you can only record onto 4 tracks at a time, they give you 4 what they call trims. These are line trims. So when there's a function switch right here that you can either listen to the tape after you've recorded it, or you can do that and hear the line source. When you click it over to the line source, and anything that's plugged into here, that's what you hear. And then you've got a trim, which is a volume. So you can, if the microphone or whatever, your guitar and your keyboard is not loud enough or it's too loud, you can adjust accordingly. And then you have a tape cue. Tape cue is a very necessary function that you have to have on a deck like this, because once you record onto a track on here, you need to be able to hear it and hear what you're recording on top of it, because you rewind the tape, you listen to what you just recorded, and you're going to record on top of it. So the tape cue function, which is, see here, and this is the monitor section here, and the tape cue function is right there. You just depress that, and then leave this one channel on line, and you can listen to what you've just recorded here. So in other words, if you're recording by yourself, and you can just leave this plugged into channel 1 and record on all 8 tracks. You can leave it into channel 1 and assign channel 1 to track 1. Record on track 1, rewind it, listen to track 1. While you're listening to track 1, you can assign this to track 2, because you're going to listen to it through the tape cue. Once you've got track 2 recorded, then you go to hear track 2 and turn up the tape cue so you can hear what you recorded on track 2, track 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so on and so forth. So that way you can, your recordings will stay in sync with what you're hearing and what you're playing, and then you just leave this one onto line. Now when you want to do your mix on everything, you've got all 8 tracks recorded, or 6 or 7 or however many you use, then make sure everything is on tape. Once it's on tape, then you can hear the tape, the tape source directly. Here's the EQ section, and it's got a sweepable mid section. So you got the high, the low, sweepable mid. So this is, you can really play with this a lot. There's a lot of fine tuning that you can do with the tracks that come through it. It's got 2 effects cues, and so you can configure the mixer. You can use these channels up here to send what do you call it? I've lost my train of thought here. You can send it to some outboard gear like I've got. This is a little nano verb, and this is an way old Effectron, which works. It works good. So you can you can send your signal from any channel to these things and bounce them back, and so you can add reverb just like by a turn of a knob. Of course, pan control left and right. So when you're doing a stereo mix, it's wherever you want that to sit. And then you can assign, here's how you assign the tracks if you want to record. If you want to record 1, 2, 3, or 4, and it's 1 and 2, you have to pan hard. That's for 1, that's for 2, and then 3 and 4. But when you're playing back, you leave these depressed. And the great thing is, once you have those depressed and you've recorded like that, they act like solo buttons. And a solo button allows you to listen to just one track at a time without adjusting all the levels if you're working on a mix. So you can just take all these offline, and you'll only hear track 1, and then back and forth like that. So I like that feature. That's a very helpful feature when you're doing a mix. This particular unit, I bought it on eBay. I just bought it, and it all functions work. Everything works. It records on all 8 channels. It plays back on all 8 channels. The EQ, everything that I've used has worked perfectly. I've never had haven't had any issues with anything. Never did use as a rehearsal button, which I've never used, and I didn't use it when I had it one before. Auto in and out, and I haven't used that, but I did have a punch pedal that I was able to punch in and out of tracks. I didn't use that too often either. The biggest complaint, well, the only complaint about this particular deck is that I think the spring underneath here, there's a tab on the door, and there's a spring to it. So because when you depress this, it's supposed to like flow. It's supposed to like just like kind of come up like that. Had to put that sound effect in there, of course. But I mean, you can help it up, and it stays up, and that's fine. And then that's not a big issue. That I would have to open the machine up to fix that. And of course, you know, when I do decide to change the belts, because then you get into the tape transport is cassette, which is what people complain about because it's a vintage item, and there's rubber belts and there's a rubber wheel, a roller, a pinch roller they call it, that actually helps to transport the tape. There is a motor in here. It's called a capstan motor, and you can't see it. I don't have enough light, but it's a little metal piece that sticks up through the cassette tape, and then the pinch roller rolls like this. The capstan motors, then the little capstan spins, and as the pinch roller hits it, it transports the tape along. And the great thing about this, back in the day of the cassette, you would buy a deck, you'd plug it in. That capstan motor was always running. It was constantly running. Well, the thing I really like about this deck is that it doesn't run until you put a tape in, because there's some triggers back here that turn the motor on, and they work by putting the cassette in there. You put the cassette in there, the motor's running, and then it's ready to go. So if you're doing a session and you want to save the motor because it's driven by a belt, and you want to save you really don't want to have to open this thing up and change the belt, although it's not that terrible if you need to do so. But you take it out and it stops the motor. I think that's a pretty brilliant thing. Close this, and it's supposed to isolate the sound of the motor, because you can't. It is an electronic device, and there is a motor that's actually spinning, physical motor spinning, and you do kind of hear it. But when this is closed, you really don't hear it. And then when you start working on music, then you're not going to hear it at all. And this is something. This is old. I mean, this is not like I'm looking at play. This is not like the greatest thing ever. But just give you an example. I used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I used 6 of the tracks on this one. For some reason, I didn't record on 1 and I didn't record on 8. So I just kind of kept it in the middle of physically in the middle of the tape. But from here, you can you've got, there's a volume control right here that will just lower the whole volume of the entire thing, so you don't have to adjust these separate ones to lower the volume. Once you get the volume that you're kind of looking for, then you can use this as a monitor. That's what it is. It's a monitor volume. And then you've got the pan left and right, and you can listen to these. You can if you want to just hear, like, okay, what did I do here? I don't remember what I did. There's some drums and whatever. And it sounds like I was using a guitar as a bass guitar, so we might want to boost that a little bit for some bass. But anyway, that you get the idea. That's how that works. But this is a really awesome deck, and this particular one works really well. And if you could find one in this condition that's running like this for about $200 or less, I would suggest you buy it. This is I know it's 2018, and I know that this is like antiquated. This is vintage equipment, and it will not sound, no matter what you do, no matter what you do to it, no matter what you plug into it, because you got to remember, it's recording onto a cassette, and it's not only is it recording onto a cassette, it's recording onto 1/8 inch of tape, which is like thin, and there's like physically not a lot of space on here, so they're cramming 8 separate tracks onto that little bitty tape. But even so, it still sounds really brilliant for what it is. But back to my point is that this will not replace your DAW, and there's no way this is going to sound better than Logic Pro or Pro Tools. It's just not going to. But it does have a dirty kind of quality. No, I don't mean dirty, but it's got a definite quality to it that I like. That I've never been able to achieve digitally. Not to say that I can't, but then again, they've got digital pianos that sound good, but still don't sound as good as a real piano. So I guess that's kind of my point, is that this is the real thing, even though it's a cassette. And open reel that's a whole nother issue, is open reel, which I may review that at another time, because I do have a really nice open reel deck. But for what it's worth, and if you've got a guitar and you just want to, you have an idea for a song, you got an idea for whatever, you're inspired to do something, rather than turn on the computer, open up the program, plug in your interface if it's not plugged in already. If you don't have a setup, and you gotta go through the process of setting up. Well, you don't have to do that with this thing. There's an on-off button right back here. You just turn it on, plug something in. This is you can plug it up to a stereo, or you can just plug headphones into it, and then you can hear. And then once you do that, then you've got this thing fully functional. And another good thing, just as an aside, is if you don't want to use this as a recorder, because you don't actually have to use it as a recorder, you just take the tape out, stop the capstan motor from running, turn that, then you don't have to worry about this portion of the deck, and then you can use this as a standalone mixer, and it sounds damn good as a standalone mixer. It really does. You can record onto other gear using this. Now, it doesn't have 8 direct outs. That's the only downside of it, but you can still get a lot of outs from this thing if you're creative enough. And there's a way, and you can Google that. That's online. But all in all, for the price, if you can get one for a decent price, you can get a really good mixer and really a good recorder. I liked mine before. I was real happy with it. And I'm happy with this one now. So if you can get a Tascam Porta-Studio 488 Mark II that's running, it's fully functional for a good price, like $200 or less, because honestly, I wouldn't spend a whole lot more than that. Go for it. All right, later.